Hey there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of the THW NHL News and Rumors Rundown video series. This is episode number 2. We did our first one last week on Saturday. We hope that you guys enjoyed. My name is Jim Parsons. I'm here with thehockeyraiders.com. I'm going to be doing this every week, so we're going to go through all the news and rumors in the NHL, the biggest stories from this past week, and we're going to talk about them. We're going to update you on the news. We're going to talk about what's going on. And this week, especially, there is a ton going on because there were agreements between the NHL and the NHLPA. There's news and rumors about certain players. There's talk about realignment. There's talk about all sorts of crazy stuff. We're going to cover some of that here this week and do that right now. So don't forget, check out thehockeyraiders.com for all the news and rumors articles, everything that I do over there. You can check me out. My author profile is Jim Parsons, and we get into a lot more depth than we're going to be doing here. But to just kind of briefly cover what we're going to be talking about today, the first big story, obviously, is the NHL and the NHL have tentatively agreed upon a 56-game schedule for this season. There's a lot to talk about how this is going to unfold, whether or not the realignment or the All-Canadian division is still going to happen. It probably will. Will this be permanent? Is it something that they're going to move everybody to the United States? There's some talk about that. Will they be able to do bubbles or hubs, or who's going to play where? All we know at this point is that the agreement is set, it is tentative, is to be voted on, and the season would start on January 13th, 2021. So that they've ironed out most of their stuff. They just now have to realize where they're going to go, and much of that has to do with the pandemic, the provinces, what's still left. Apparently there's one province still sort of holding out here on what's going to happen and whether or not they can play in Canada. But that's the big news for this week. NHL and NHLPA are going to have their agreement done, and the NHL season is supposed to start on January 13th, barring any major emergency with the pandemic and COVID-19. All right, moving on to some specific teams. There's talk in Toronto about the pressure that Frederik Andersen is under for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Basically, one of the reports out there is that he's got about 30 games or so this season to turn it around. Now, I've had a lot of people say, well, what does turn it around mean? It's not like he's a terrible goaltender. He's not a terrible goaltender. He does have the tendency to have a slower start to the season. He did have an inconsistent year in 2019-20, but he's still not the reason the Toronto Maple Leafs have not moved past the first round of the playoffs, although he didn't have the greatest playoff series as a goaltender, basically in his history with the Leafs. But the deal here is that there's only so much time for Andersen to really show that he's a starter. He's a free agent at the end of the year. There's a contract coming due here. Toronto's going to have to make a decision. They don't want to wait too long, and it's hard to know exactly what's going to happen with trades this season. So there's a lot of pressure for Frederik Andersen to perform this year, and maybe 30 games or so is about all he's going to get to show that he's the guy. Jack Campbell is a suitable backup, but if not, Toronto might have to look at the market next year where there's a ton of goaltending free agents that are going to be available in the offseason. So whether or not future of Frederik Andersen stays with Toronto or not is very unclear. Speaking of Toronto, there was a talk today, especially since the NHL has sort of figured out their agreement, and they're going to be having taxi squads, which means 4 to 6 players additional on each roster, that maybe there's room for a player like Corey Perry. If he signs at league minimum, if he's not really keen on being an NHL regular and just wants to go home to Toronto, have some fun with guys like Jason Spezza and Joe Thornton, would there be room for him on the roster? How would they make it work? I don't know that there is. The Leafs are already over the cap by $1.04 million, so fitting him in would be tight. They'd have to move some wingers around from right wing to left wing to fit Corey Perry in there. Where would he go? How often would he play? There's lots of question marks there. There's also buzz that he might go to Ottawa. That seems more realistic, but this taxi player thing has thrown a lot of stuff up in the air, and there's lots going to be happening here in the next couple of weeks. Okay, couple of announcements to you make in terms of retirements. Alex Steen has officially retired from the St. Louis Blues in the NHL. He will go on LTIR as a retired player, which means his cap hit will come off the books for St. Louis. What they do with that isn't 100% clear, although a lot of that's going to go to Vince Dunn. Might they hit the NHL free agency market? They probably will in some respect. Maybe a player like Eric Holla is a good fit there. There's some whispers that Mike Hoffman's maybe a St. Louis Blues kind of guy, but he's expensive. He wants $5.5 to $6.5 million, and we're going to talk about that in a minute with Mike Hoffman, but it doesn't look like that's going to be St. Louis. But although St. Louis is going to dip into the market, probably get Vince Dunn done. Get Vince Dunn signed, and then you can go into the free agent market. St. Louis is probably going to do that. And another piece of news on retirement, unfortunately, not retirement so much, but he's not going to be playing in the 2020-21 season. That's Henrik Lundqvist. He signed with the Washington Capitals for 1 year, but $1.5 million to try to have a chance to win that Stanley Cup that has eluded him as a New York Ranger. Unfortunately, the bad news is he's got a heart condition that he's dealing with, and it has been kind of decided that staying away from hockey for the near future is probably the better play. What that means for the Rangers, the Washington Capitals, we don't really know. Will he come back at some point in the season? Hard to say. Will he retire? Maybe. But the Capitals are going to need a backup goalie. They've got Ilya Samsonov as a starter. They're going to need somebody. That has led to a little bit of speculation that maybe MarcAndre Fleury out of Las Vegas could be one of the options. The Golden Knights were rumored to want to move Fleury earlier in the offseason to free up some cap space. They have now since settled on the idea of Leonard and Fleury as a 1-2 tandem in Vegas. But he's a $7 million player, which means the Caps can't really fit him in unless they do a lot of work. That would be LTIR for Lundqvist. Other players could be trading somebody to Vegas and getting something back, having Vegas retain some of Fleury's salary. Either way, Vegas or Washington's going to have to figure out their backup goaltending situation. Fleury's name might just be one of the people that they look at. Internally, the Washington Capitals don't have much experience at backup, so somebody's going to have to help Samsonov out. And what they're going to do, we don't really know. We'll keep our eyes on that one. Speaking of Vegas, there's some talk about all this Max Pacioretty stuff. Well, maybe Jonathan Marchessault is one of those guys that could move instead of Max Pacioretty. There's some talk that he's been shopped instead of Pacioretty, and that move might free up the cap space Vegas wants to free up in order to get under the cap and maybe dip their toes into free agency a little bit more here. I don't know that anybody's actually going to move out of Vegas. It's a lot of talk, and they're always in the conversation, but it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. They're just sort of spinning their wheels if they move a person like Pacioretty or somebody like Jonathan Marchessault. So I don't know that we're going to expect to see that. It could happen. There's some talk about it happening, but we'll see. What we do know is that there's lots of chatter about unrestricted free agency, and now that this NHL NHLPA agreement has sort of been settled, that there's some urgency to get some of these people signed, whether it's Mike Hoffman, whether it's Eric Haula, people that are still out there. Corey Perry's of the world, we just talked about him. Anthony Duclair just signed with Florida, so he's off the market now. But what about a guy like Hoffman? How long is it going to take before he signs somewhere? What's going to happen with guys like Eric Haula? There's, Chris Johnson of Sportsnet is reporting that there's some urgency now to get some of these guys done. Training camps are going to be starting here in the next couple weeks. We're going to have to watch really closely to see what's going on there. And speaking of the urgency, that really means that a team like the Tampa Bay Lightning are going to have to figure out their cap situation. They're well over. They've got some restricted free agents that they either need to move or sign or do something with. A team like Detroit might be somebody that could get involved with Tampa and maybe help them out with their situation. Detroit is willing to take on some salary if there's some sweeteners involved in the deals here, but Tampa's going to have to do something pretty quick because they're one of a couple teams that are way over the cap, and they're going to have to figure it out before the season starts. So we'll keep our eyes on all these stories and a whole lot more. Don't forget, go to the Hockey Raider at Twitter if you want to catch some of the tweets that are going out there. The latest news and rumors at thehockeyraiders.com. And, of course, you can check out my profile, too, and check out all the articles I'm covering both on the NHL Rumors and on the Edmonton Oilers. And we're doing the 12 Days of Hockeymas going on right now. So if you're a team that is following what you might want or the history of your franchise, all of that's happening on thehockeyraiders.com right now. So check it out. We will talk to you again next week, you guys. We appreciate it very much. And hopefully you guys enjoy these segments. We'll keep doing them every Saturday. But that's the News and Rumors Report for THW and the NHL this week, December 19th, 2020. Year's almost over, guys.